Hello and welcome. I am Raziel, and so today I want to talk about the old world. Now, the old world is kind of interesting right now. It doesn't look well supported. If you go to the old world section on the Games Workshop website, you will find two factions. If you go to the Age of Sigmar side, you will find lots of Warhammer Fantasy Battle models. Lots of the old models still available right now. How most of them still have a lot of square bases because they never really took the photos for Age of Sigmar. Kind of weird. But most of those are legacy armies, and I'll get to that in a minute. And I was always thinking, this is kind of weird. If you were going to do a narrative-based game, you would want the narrative or the models to, reflect the narrative. And the narrative is the time of the Three Emperors, which is quite a big, a long time period. And it started basically because the Grand Theologian decided that a baby couldn't be an emperor. Yeah, that's how it goes. I'm sorry, but that's really weird. Marguerite was only an infant at the start, and that was it. So, what would have I done? If this was me, I would have said, let's make a box full of Empire. All the Empire, basically. Like we did with Horus Heresy, and there's a lot of similarities here which we could do. Now, when Horus Heresy dropped, version 2, Age of Sigmar, all they really had to do was release Space Marines. And if you read the books, most of the stories revolve around Space Marines, and that's it. Why? Because that was the main crutch of the Horus Heresy. It was Astartes versus Astartes. Yes, there were obviously Dark Mechanicum, Traitor Imperial Army, the Custodes, Sisters of Silence, Assassins. There was also other factions, but the main two warring factions were legions of Astartes, Traitor and Loyal. So when they released the Age of Darkness box, they didn't have to make two armies in it. They just had to put the one full of Astartes, and that was it. And there you had it, because box was either one army, which I know a lot of people have done, or two armies if you wish to split it. I mean, splitting it is fine. I always think that the Spartan tank would always give someone a better value than the Tempter Dreadnought, but there you go. But not only did having just Space Marines in there being able to be one army or two, it also gave you a choice of 18 factions, each of the legions. I mean, you could have at last edition of 40k used the box for 40k, and it would have been good for 40k as well. The Spartan tank and the Tempter Dreadnought with Terminate, all would be fantastic. But, they decided to put the Spartan tank and the Tempter Dreadnought into Legends. Never mind. But like I said, straight away, that one box provided you a choice of 18 different factions. The old world, you have a choice of two. And I've kind of seen this pattern for Games Workshop now, because Legions of Imperialis has 3 legions you can choose from. Kind of. 3 factions you can choose from, I should say. And again, kind of. Because you have the Titans, which could be obviously Chaos or Loyal. The Astartes, again, Traitor or Loyal. And Solar Auxilia, Loyal. And yes, while the Astartes could still be 18 different factions, as I said, which is fine, it still kind of looks like it hasn't really been thought of, because there's no models to really say, this here is a Death Guard model, this here is a Thousand Suns model, this is an Imperial Fist model. They've all painted up as Death Guard and nothing else. And when you show off your models like that, it always looks kind of bad, because it does make it feel like they haven't really given you much choice in what you can do. It's Death Guard versus Solar Auxilia. And unfortunately, because they did it that way as well, you kind of got to split the box. You have 2 armies. Yes, Solar Auxilia can ally with Loyalist Astartes, same with the Warhound Titans, but it still feels like it's meant to be 2 armies. The Age of Darkness box, yes, could be split up into 2 different factions, but also can be used as a single faction. So, back to the old world. What I would have done is made it an Empire-only box. And the reason for this is, it's the time of the 3 Emperors. It is a civil war within the Empire. That's it. And straight away, you would have, 3 different factions, minimum, 1 for each leader. And that's the bare minimum you would have had. But you would also have 10 different factions for each of the imperial states. And then you could have even more factions for border princes and city-states as well. City-state is not a complete state, it's a independent from the state it's in. And they don't all work the same either. They do have different strengths and weaknesses from each other. You could have something like Talabheim, which is very much a very defensive artillery. I mean, it's kind of akin to the Imperial Fists. Marienburg, which is a city port, which would be very much, more urban fighting. Known industrial with steam tanks, and yes, steam tanks were available at that time. If you played Chaos Bane, you would know this. And so you'd have so much different choice. And the really thing is that, unlike the Horus Heresy, as this is kind of the weirdest part, but unlike the Horus Heresy, we knew what happened with the Horus Heresy. We've known that for the last 30, 40 years, what happened in the Horus Heresy. It was put together because they had to find an excuse for Titans Imperial to fight Imperial. And it's grown from there. Now we have, 60 books, plus the Siege of Terror books. And it's in pretty much every single Space Marine and Chaos Space Marine Codex. So we know what happened. The time of the Three Emperors is not really well known. We don't know what happened. All we know was there was Imperial Civil War. And that was it. And that comes to the second problem. When you release a narrative game based on a certain time period, be Horus Heresy, the Wild West Exodus, or the Kings of War books. Well, Kings of War is pretty much a large time, so I think we can avoid that one. But Wild West Exodus and the Horus Heresy, you've got to have some sort of fluff and narrative to go around it. And we don't have that for the Three Emperors. We have, like I said, plenty of books for the Horus Heresy. Wild West Exodus has plenty of fluff talking about the time period, including diary excerpts, letters. There's even a novel out called Lazarus, which is really good. But we have a time period, and it keeps to that with relative characters and ideas, vehicles, and other things. With the time of the Three Emperors, we have no story. And the book they released to go with it isn't even related to the Empire. It's related to Bretonnia. I get they want to sell Bretonian models, fair enough, and good way to do that is with the books. But it's like Transformers for people who read. Those who remember back in the 80s with Transformers was pretty much there to sell toys. But yeah, this is pretty much for people who read Transformers books, people who read. And we have nothing about the Free Empire, the Empire of the time, just Bretonnia. We don't even have a book about Tomb Kings either. And it would have been really interesting to see them flesh this out. Rather go, it's during the time of the Three Emperors, this is why you can't use your named characters, except, the immortal ones, but we're not going to let you use those. You can't, use all of the old models because, they're not during that time, even though some are. And, like such as the Chaos Lords, not Archeon, obviously, but things like Valkyr, Sigvald. And it just seemed weird that this kind of feels like this backward way of doing it. Like, set in a time frame is fine. It's great. I like the idea to have a narrative set during a certain point of time. You can reenact historical battles with your friends. And that's one of the big draws of Horus Heresy, is being able to do that. What battles can you do for this time? I think I could tell you a couple. You've got the King Lewin Orcslayer declares the errantry war to get rid of Bretonnia of the Orcs. That would have been a good one to do. What else we got here? There is the War of the Vultures, which is Chaos versus Khemri, which is again a good one. Very interesting to see Chaos be greedy rather than just invaders. The Terror of Tilia, which has given literally disappearing small towns near the Blighted Marshes. Yeah, so that's another one. So yeah, that's a legacy army, but again, something interesting. Demons of Chaos would have a fair few as well. They fought Bretonnia at this time. It's weird that the kind of I can go to the legacy armies to find more interesting battles. The Duke of Maldred of Masselin opens a realm to chaos and unleashes a host of Nurgle demons into the city. The demons are banished in 3 days, and the fighting is pretty severe. And finally, let's talk about vampire counts, because they kind of disappeared at this time. In an old Warhammer armies, in an old Warhammer Fantasy rulebook, it's got the only time I've actually seen the Three Emperors actually titled, and most of that was because, Vlad was deciding to be a bit of a nuisance. So there's that. So it's kind of, like I said, we have no real history of the time, especially in the Empire. If I was looking at some old Empire Warhammer Army books, and there's this big gap. You have the Vampiric Wars ending in 2105. And then you've got the Great War of Chaos, which is, where it ends in the year 2300-ish. So you've got this big gap, and there's nothing there. There's this massive gap, and there's nothing there in the book. But Games Workshop don't seem to want to flesh out this time. The time period they want the game to be set in. Horus Heresy, we know so much about. When version 2 came out, when Age of Darkness dropped, we knew so much about the Horus Heresy. So many battles, so many loyalties, loyalist traitors, and traitor loyalists. All that stuff like the Shattered Legions and the Knights Errant. All this cool stuff we knew by the time that dropped. When the Old World dropped and the time period it was set in, we knew nothing. If they said it during the Great War of Chaos, we'd have a lot more. That's really ridiculous that we'd have a lot more at that time. But they didn't. They said it before that, when there's so little lore. And like I said, the only lore I can really find on it, in looking through loads of books, is one page, and it pretty much talks about Vlad von Carstein attacking the Empire after the Skaven Wars. Not the Vampiric Wars, because that was Manfred von Carstein. Vlad von Carstein. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Just my thoughts on fixing the old world. What are your thoughts? I like reading your comments. I really do. I think it's interesting. How would you fix it? What do you think problems are? And I'll see you all in the next one. Link to Wayland Games down below, as always. And there is Forbidden Planet. Well, Wayland Games, if you want to save some money on your Warhammer, up to 20% off, and free delivery off to £20. Forbidden Planet, if you like comics, it sounds really dodgy. Forbidden Planet. It's based off the film, which is fantastic. Leslie Nielsen's in it. Yeah, one of his earliest roles. Yeah, not comic either. For comics, DVDs and manga, all the cool stuff, my comic and stuff, and merchandise, and that's it. See you all in the next one. Bye bye.